Hey guys, it's Cheyenne with Between Clean Sheets. I'm attempting to make a makeshift studio for my video this week, which will be a quick 10-point countdown ahead of week 10 for MLS. And as you can tell, I didn't really succeed. So hold on, let me fix this. Maybe. All right guys, we're headed into week 10 and I am on the road in Wisconsin traveling for work. So I decided to do a quick video with 10 things ahead of week 10 for Major League Soccer. First being, who's in first place? Well, in the Western Conference, we have Sporting Kansas City, and in the East, we have New York City FC. I have the pleasure of living in Kansas City, although I've only been to a couple games this season on account of being on the road. And that actually brings me into my second point. Currently, I am about 3 hours from Minneapolis and 2 hours from Chicago. Chicago plays Atlanta United this weekend, and Minneapolis plays Vancouver. Of those games, which one would be the most exciting one to go to? Probably Atlanta. They are crushing it. They're actually second place in the Eastern Conference and haven't lost a game since their crushing defeat against Houston, which was 5-0 at the start of the season. Crazy enough, because we're on a roll here, that brings me to my third point. 3 Team of the Week honors for Miguel Almiron, the 24-year-old Paraguayan player from Atlanta United, who has been named the April Player of the Month for Major League Soccer. He had 5 goals and 2 assists, and I have this awesome article that I shared below on his relationship with Tata, the Argentinian legend and coach for Atlanta United. Miguel Almiron was the 2017 Newcomer of the Year, and over the offseason I was super worried that he might leave Major League Soccer for better opportunities, but luckily he's still with us and he's made the experience at Mercedes-Benz Stadium for Atlanta United fans amazing. Speaking of goals, David Villa has reached 400 career goals, and I believe most of them have been netted with NYCFC. He is the captain of my fantasy team and has been a shining light in an otherwise dark experience this season for me. For some reason, my team just isn't connecting and I'm currently in last place. This weekend, NYCFC will play New York Red Bulls in their 4th installment of the Hudson Derby, which is set to be one of the more exciting matchups between the two. It is becoming quite the rivalry in the way that DC United and New York Red Bulls are not as of late because of how horrible DC United is playing. But then again, maybe we're not playing as well because we've had a couple bye weeks and haven't had as many opportunities to win, is what I keep telling myself. That moves in right along to number 5. That's the number of games Seattle Sounders have played this year, which is weird because we're heading into week 10, right? Well, I can't explain it, but the schedule is strange. So Seattle was actually a part of the CONCACAF Champions League. I think they got knocked out either in the semifinals or quarterfinals.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved.
CONCACAF Champions League is basically this America's competition between clubs, and they compete to see who goes on to the Club World Cup. Now, before I get into number 6, I will say Seattle knows that they're not doing so hot this year, and between several game suspension for Clint Dempsey, an awful start to the season, CCL losses having them reevaluate where they stand, and Jordan Morris being out with an ACL tear for the entire season, their coach said that they plan on making an 8-figure designated player purchase this summer. Number 6. I'm running through the 6 with my woes, is what Drake, the rapper from Toronto, said. And speaking of Toronto, I'm sorry, I'm trying so hard. Number 6, and we're talking about the 6, as Drake calls it, Toronto. The city in Canada home to Toronto FC, who actually made it as far as you can possibly go without winning the CONCACAF Champions League. They played the second game of a 2-leg series against Guadalajara, or Las Chivas, last week, and on aggregate scores, it took them to a tie, which brought them to penalty kicks. I do not watch penalty kicks, ever. But I did watch the highlights of Michael Bradley absolutely shanking this ball. I'm sorry. All of the injuries that Toronto FC has faced, Josie Altidore included after that game, who now has another hamstring injury, Michael Bradley was actually playing center defense for the game. So the game goes to PKs, Osorio misses, Bradley misses, but Toronto has been taking this tournament very seriously. They even postponed a game against DC United a couple weeks ago, and they put it all on the field. Josie Altidore ended up leaving, I think, late into the second half, just completely haggard. And Coach Greg Vanney has a lot to be proud of. I say I look forward to more participation by teams like Toronto in Champions League. Maybe at some point the Club World Cup might be something to watch, and we'll finally get to see the opportunity for the "is MLS better than European soccer" debate come to fruition. Let's put a bet on how many years that will take. Like 6 or 8. On to number 7. That's how many goals that DC United has scored this year. In our loss against Philadelphia over the weekend, we scored 2 to their 3. And I think there's only one other game where we scored 2 goals. Then that was against Houston, where we tied at our, quote, home game at the Maryland Soccerplex. DC United is not doing so hot this year, and we haven't played 10 full games. I think we've had 2 byes, which is an excuse I'm using for why we are in last place in the Eastern Conference. I really hate that I smiled when I said that, and I don't mean to be sassy. I'm just really frustrated because being a DC United fan is really frustrating right now. We are not great. We're not great. So only 7 goals scored by DC United so far, which brings me to our point number 8. That's how many games we have until Audi Field opens. I was in DC last weekend and had the opportunity to jog over from my hotel down in Navy Yard to Buzzard Point, where I watched construction workers filling in parts of the stadium. And I want to put some of that footage in here. Maybe we'll tease it a little bit. But I'd also like to give it its own dedicated video. I will be back in DC in mid-June and of course in July for Vancouver Whitecaps at Audi Field for the first game for DC United. If you haven't already submitted your information for the opportunity to have a ticket, I highly suggest you do, and I will link that below as well. On to number 9. Last week was week 9 and the first game that LAFC played at the Bank of California Stadium. Now, I don't know how Audi Field will compare to Bank of California, but supposedly it is an awesome facility. It's got a training facility, apparently has the same kind of little pool luxury suite that the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium Everbank Field does. And Will Ferrell and the rest of LAFC did a really good job of promoting it the past couple of weeks. And good news for LAFC, they enjoyed their first win in the stadium, which wasn't hard because they played Seattle and Seattle's terrible. And number 10. It is week 10, and what is the biggest deal that's happened for me in week 10? Well, I downloaded the new Major League Soccer app, which you can use to update your fantasy league. Now, I participate in MLS Fantasy like a total fiend, which would make you think I was actually good at it, but I'm not. I'm really bad at the draft, and I also get very overwhelmed with my options. And also, I'd like to think it's a little bit of luck. However, great news about the app. All right, guys, so here is what the new app looks like. It is black and sleek. Of course, new logo, who dis? Now, you've got stories. You've got team news. My favorite team is obviously DC United. You've got highlights. All 36 goals from week 9. All right, so you got highlights. And you've got scores. Oh, you want to see scores from several weeks ago? Well, go to the calendar. How did DC United do on April 14th? I'm actually pretty sure they didn't play that weekend. Nope, they played Columbus in Annapolis. Timeline. Key events. All events. Highlights. The lineup. Far more user-friendly. Audi Index, which is still this data-driven thing I really don't understand, but what does all this say? DC United didn't win because they suck and I don't like them right now. And if you click more at the bottom, where does it take you? Fantasy! I'm logging into my fantasy team. Maybe this will give you a better understanding of why I'm not doing so well. It's really hard because with the budget, I can't fit in all the people that I want to. My saving grace, however, has been Graham Zusi. God bless you, Graham Zusi. His successes with Sporting Kansas City have been very heartwarming this year. Standings, stats, clubs, MLS store. In case you want to buy that Earth Day jersey that's been so hot for literally Atlanta United and nobody else, I bet you could probably still buy one for DC United. While we're on this though, I'm going to get into my segment called Shitting the Bed. DC United's team store regularly shits the bed for me. Please tell me on what planet would I ever wear this nonsense? What is that? Maybe I just have a different aesthetic and I'm being judgmental and I really shouldn't be. You can buy tickets on here. We won't get into that. Video, schedule. Here's their schedule for you. I mean, it takes a second to load because I'm on terrible extended stay Wi-Fi. But you get the point. Ooh, look at all those losses. Neat. Now, one of my biggest gripes about the ESPN app is that whenever it gives me a push notification with an awesome article I might actually be interested in, which is pretty rare to begin with, I'll click through and it just takes me right to the homepage, and then I forget what the title of the article or the update was, and I have to go find it myself, and it pisses me off. There's so much about ESPN that pisses me off, but I don't have time for that in this video. But I do want to read to you all the things that come with the new MLS app that you should definitely download because it's very, very user-friendly. A complete UI refresh. I have no idea what that means, but they say that it means all new design and puts all the action and storylines front and center. Now, they are big on the highlights now, which means you don't have to search far to look for highlights. As a YouTuber myself, I realize that MLS puts highlights on their YouTube channel, but not very many people watch it unless it has like Zlatan in it, and not very many people are subscribed. You don't want to have to go out of your way to look for highlights of a game. 2, a deep personalization, as they call it. You can pick your favorite team, pick your favorite player, you can have the alerts customized to what you care about. So if all you care about is Zlatan, I'm looking at you, most of my friends who bother me about soccer, then yeah, all you can look at is Zlatan. My favorite update, and I love the people who write copy for this, is blazing fast notifications. So how is a blazing fast notification helpful to me? Well, in the moment where I think putting David Villa in my lineup for fantasy is a good idea, and about 15 minutes before the game starts, they say, oh wait, he hurt his ankle, he's gonna sit on the bench. It might be really helpful for me to know. And it makes it even more helpful that I can go into the app to change my lineup instead of having to use the internet on my laptop. Now, what was so bad about it at the beginning of this year was I couldn't even open it on Chrome. I literally had to go to Safari to do it, which I was so peeved about, which is why, if you'll notice, I currently have in my MLS Between Clean Sheets folder, Safari, because I literally had to go into Safari to change my lineup. And I would have complained about it more on Twitter if anybody followed me. Along with fully integrated fantasy, the biggest and most exciting deal is condensed matches are readily available. If you like soccer like I do and want to watch every team but don't have the opportunity to watch each game in its 2-hour entirety, condensed matches are basically 15 to 20 minutes of the action. So if you want to see how a hot team is doing but they're playing kind of a crappy team, you don't have to watch that crappy team embarrass themselves for 2 hours. You only have to watch them do it for like 20 minutes. And for the first time ever, you can get every club and league related article or content in one place. Okay, last and certainly not least, the primary transfer window ended this week at midnight of whatever night it was, and the saga with Nguyen and New England Revolution has finally come to a close. He was traded to LAFC for a certain amount of allocation money and the opportunity for New England to have the first round pick for the Super Draft next year. Now, this is my segment called Who Shit the Bed? Who did shit the bed here? New England Revolution, of course. For the past maybe year or so, Nguyen has been begging New England to transfer him. I think he asked them on 3 different occasions. He came onto the scene in 2012. He played for Vancouver very briefly before they cut him, and he ended up playing for New England and has been playing there ever since. He holds some of the best records for that club as a midfielder. He's from Vietnam. He was on the US men's team radar when he was younger, about 22, 23, but played for a Vietnamese club and was one of the biggest US stars to play for them. When he came back to America, he netted some awesome stats for New England, and I'm going to read them to you because I wrote them down and I don't want to forget. Having been with New England since 2012, like I said, he has netted 54 goals, 56 assists, and 211 appearances for the team. But who really shit the bed here? Apparently it's the general manager, Mike Burns, and the Kraft Sports Group, like Bob Kraft. You know him? Have you heard of him? Well, apparently they play hardball when it comes to their contracts and have had a history of really embarrassing public disputes about contracts with some of their players. The thing is, you can play hardball in 2014 when Nguyen is a contender for MVP, you guys make it to the final, but you can't really do that now because your team is not that great. So whenever a contract is up for negotiation, they're using all these weird technicalities as part of the collective bargaining agreement. And I think at some point they probably threatened Lee. He had a bad attitude about it. He ended up not even making the bench for the first part of this season for New England, and he didn't even show up to the first part of their preseason training camp. In fact, they went down to Arizona to train and he didn't travel with them. At one point someone said it was about physical fitness, which I don't buy, but it's kind of sad to see Lee win in that position, so I was really excited to see him go to LA for a couple of reasons. One, he gets to play with Bob Bradley, who was the coach of the US team at the time where he played for them back in 2007, 2008. He gets a completely brand new training facility and a super excited fan base, which is something that New England really lacks. They're one of those teams that tries to get away with paying as little as possible, kind of seeing what they can do with what they have. And that can work, but you have to be invested in the team. So I wanted to make that quick, but I don't think that it was. I just had a lot to talk about. 10 points ahead of week 10. DC United plays nobody. What is a bye week for DC United but another chance to put my worry at bay? Well, that's it for me, guys. I look forward to talking to you next week. In the meantime, peace, love, and soccer. If you're gonna see me anywhere, it'll be on Twitter at BTWNCleanSheets. And I'm really hoping I go to Chicago this weekend. We'll see. Bye.
Our soccer.